Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Forbes senior contributor Mark Joyella. Vice Media Group officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection earlier this week. And as we know, this comes just 6 years after the company was valued at $5.7 billion. So that's a huge plunge here. Mark, simply put, what happened?
Yeah, it's a fascinating case of a brash media brand that really seemed to be taking charge and threatening a lot of the legacy media companies in the world, and then to see that valuation just crash to close to nothing essentially. I think a lot of things happened. One, obviously, there's a larger picture here of a pullback in digital advertising, which is impacting a lot of digital brands. That's one thing, but specifically involving Vice, they had this really specific way of going after younger consumers, and they did a great job of attracting millennials to watching video content, reading digital content. I think that over time, though, it may have been harder for that generation to, or rather for Vice to kind of get the younger generation now in the form of Gen Z consumers who either weren't as attracted to that style of telling stories as millennials may have been, or just weren't consuming content in the same way. And that seemed to be something that really impacted Vice in a way that maybe some of the other digital brands haven't had that problem.
Vice News is known for saying stories in a compelling way. It is an edgy brand. Simply put, are you surprised? Was there writing on the wall here before the bankruptcy?
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, from the leadership of Vice all the way down to the products that they produced, it was, just as you said, really edgy, really in your face. They came out with a TV show that originally aired on HBO, and the style was, no ads, no anchors, and no censors. And that was their style. They didn't want to have somebody wearing a tie in a studio introducing reporting. They just jumped into these hot spots around the world, like North Korea, and it was such a unique style. Why that has not continued to attract an audience is a question of maybe just the way people are changing their opinions about how they want to access and consume information. But certainly separate from that is the issue of how do you translate the energy that they can produce as far as their content and their style and their attitude into what they have to survive, which is revenue and a reliable source of revenue. One of the things that Vice did over time was to continue to seek out new funding, so they would go to investors, and that sort of hinted that there wasn't that reliable source of advertising revenue that would say, hey, this model is actually working, despite everything you see, which is, hey, we're on TV, we're everywhere, we're around the world. That sort of hinted that there were larger problems.
I want to talk about how people consume news and how that has dramatically changed in the past 2 decades. Obviously, before, news was appointment viewing. You would turn on the 6 o'clock news. You would turn on the 11 o'clock news. You had those anchors. They felt like home. I could still name my local anchors back in the Philadelphia suburbs now because it felt like they were your home. They were part of your daily routine. Now you can get news for free just by going on your phone, going on Twitter, going on TikTok, consuming those smaller bites. Did that impact Vice here? Is that part of the reason why it had to file for bankruptcy?
I think it did. I mean, I think there is that, when Vice was at the height of its powers, and if you think about it, this was like the early 2010s. They had a film production house. They had an in-house marketing firm. They had employees, 3,000 employees around the world. They felt like this is the future, and I think they did have an attitude toward those. As you said, the kind of the your mom and dad's TV, or even your grandparents' TV, depending on how old you are. The fact that you would sit down at 6 o'clock and watch a newscast, and you knew the names of the people who brought you that news. But overall, there have been shifts that have threatened not just Vice, but a lot of digital media. The dependency on social media to reach consumers, to say, hey, whether it's a newspaper article or a TV show, to have that connection, to use social media as a way to get connected to an audience, that has changed. I think we've seen in just, let's put it in the Elon Musk era of Twitter, there is this sort of almost a kind of people pulling back from getting information via Facebook or Twitter and saying, hey, it's too toxic. I don't even know what I can believe anymore. I want reliable sources, that may have impacted Vice, but certainly is impacting digital media as a whole, especially since things like platforms like Facebook have changed their algorithm. So, some of those old news sources, they didn't get the traction via social that they had originally. And the problem for digital sites like Vice was, they were on social media, they were everywhere. They weren't getting as much revenue out of that deal as platforms like Facebook were getting.
Mark, I want to break down some numbers throughout the years here. So in 2016, Vice turned down a $3.5 billion acquisition offer from Disney. Then just 6 years ago in 2017, as I said before, Vice Media was valued at $5.7 billion. And this week, the company estimated the value of its assets and liabilities are between $500 million and $1 billion. So what does this steep plunge say about the future of the industry?
I think it suggests a few things. One, maybe, and we've seen this over time repeat itself, these valuations we talked about, at the dawn of the internet, companies had outrageous valuations that didn't hold up over time. That's something that's going to affect companies like this when they go forward and try and get investors. They, as you said, even in the past few months, it was reported that Vice was trying to get a buyer for roughly $1 billion, and obviously nobody was willing to take that deal. But the valuation, that drop, the question of, what is this thing really worth? That is a question that impacts a lot of other brands as well. We've seen just in the past month, BuzzFeed News shut down, and that was a case where the CEO, Jonah Peretti, said, hey, I overinvested in the brand because I liked it, because I thought that the content was cool and was important. But ultimately, I couldn't justify it anymore. And he pointed to the kind of the pullback in digital advertising as being a real driver of that. But that suggestion that he overinvested indicates that maybe people get excited about stuff. And that's not necessarily the real business story that is behind it all.
I want to talk more about BuzzFeed CEO Jonah Peretti's note to staff and his reasoning behind shuttering BuzzFeed News. This Vice bankruptcy news came on the heels of BuzzFeed announcing BuzzFeed News was being completely shut down. And as you said, Jonah Peretti did lay out a number of factors for this, like the pandemic, decreasing digital advertising, and a recession in the tech industry. But he also pinned the blame on some of his own leadership failures, like you said, overinvesting. So simply put, why is Jonah Peretti still trusted to be the leader of BuzzFeed, and nearly 180 staffers of BuzzFeed News, as well as other staffers throughout the company, are being let go?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that the answer is really about the question of, can you prove to us that there is a way to make this business work going forward? And clearly they thought that the news part wasn't going to do it. BuzzFeed continues to have, produces a lot of other content, some of the things that people may think are more silly, the light stuff, the cotton candy of the internet that people kind of soak up real quick and then forget about. But that's been a part of the lightness of the BuzzFeed brand from the beginning. the fact that they didn't think that they could do it with news, which of course, as we all know, is an investment. It does take a lot more people. It takes a lot more time to do news than it does to write a listicle of, 20 reasons why I don't want to live in Florida in the summertime, so BuzzFeed has decided, hey, we can probably continue to do that, especially when we'll get contributors to write it and we won't even pay them. We can probably get some revenue, and that's a business we can continue to be in. But the news thing, even though, BuzzFeed, memory serves data, they got a Peabody award. They did good reporting, and it's sad that model isn't something that they see as viable going forward.
Yeah, they got a Pulitzer back in 2021 for their reporting on Uyghur Muslims being detained in China. They're also known for a number of high-profile stories, like one about the sexual assault allegations against Kevin Spacey. They are also known for controversially publishing the entire Steele dossier. But do you think that the BuzzFeed news arm of the operation being shut down, do you think this is an inflection point for journalism and the media industry as a whole?
I think that's just a question that continues to be asked. It goes back to, the dawn of the internet, when it felt like newspapers were going to vanish. And many of them did, of course, with the pullback of print advertising in the face of the internet. That killed off a lot of newspapers across the country, and broadcasters as well. You talked about growing up watching a local TV station. Local TV was considered for a long time, like they were printing money. They could do no wrong. Now you talk to people in TV stations, and they are feeling that same sort of dynamic of, wow, we got to do more with less. But I think the question is, where's the model? What is the way that we can make this work, that we can do journalism and we can still reach an audience? You look at brands like the New York Times, a legacy media brand of, probably the biggest one you can think of in the US. And yet, where are they getting that? Where's the digital stuff? Where are they doing the clever stuff? It's the puzzles that they have. It's the cooking app, and it's Wirecutter, which is that product review site. They recently, bought The Standard, a sports site. It's not necessarily just from people saying, I want to subscribe to the New York Times, but a lot of brands are doing that. The Wall Street Journal has a huge paywall that people pay because they want the content. And then there are other ways that people are looking into doing things. There's kind of the ProPublica model, where it's like, we're going to have people who will basically, we're doing this as a public service. We're going to do journalism, and we're going to have investors who aren't looking to get a return on that investment other than this is good for everybody. And then you look on the other end of the scale, and you have a lot of interesting new sort of newsletters, subscription newsletters, where they cover a real niche, and they cover it deeply, and people are willing to say, I'll pay for that. I'll pay to get that email because you cover the Supreme Court, and I don't see that anywhere else. Kind of things that get cut back when newsrooms feel we don't have the money to cover everything anymore. So maybe that's a model, but you do have this sense with all of the layoffs in mainstream media and digital media that says, we're really not necessarily sure how this works. But we do know that in a time when the economy is pulling back, when advertisers pull back, we have to think of how we're going to do our job and still try and find a way to make money.
This industry continues to pivot. We're seeing that time and time again, as you mentioned. But there's a new development, and that is AI. And BuzzFeed's CEO, Jonah Peretti, signaled that he is ready to embrace that. He said that he wants to make BuzzFeed the, quote, premier platform for AI-powered content. And BuzzFeed started rolling out using AI starting in February. Do you think that AI could replace journalists?
I think journalists think AI could replace journalists, and I think it scares them a lot. If you look at one of the things that if you've ever played around with something like ChatGPT, You ask it a question, give me tell me 15 reasons why digital news sites aren't working. It probably could tell you very quickly. Ask a reporter to do that. They got to spend some time doing some research, making a few phone calls, So that's kind of, wow, if it's just about pulling information together, AI does that really well. Is it reliable enough that as a media brand, you're going to print it and say, hey, I'm confident this is good, as opposed to, a reporter who has a track record? I don't know. But there certainly has to be a way to harness that power to move faster, to maybe cover more ground as a reporter, and then by taking some of that, maybe the drudgery of making phone calls, of searching through the archive for this person's past, a candidate or whatever it is, using the AI to do that sort of thing. But I think reporters worry, it's like, but it could also write the story, couldn't it? And maybe, the answer is it could. And I'm not sure what the answer to that is, other than I hope that we don't leave all of the reporting to the AI. I hope that we can work with it and maybe get more news done,
For my job's sake, I certainly hope that's the case. Mark Joyella, thank you so much for coming on and breaking down the media news landscape updates for us. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Brittany.